choose to be the competition with someone points on their view. Yeah, I would be very proud to see proud to see her run for president.
City of African same
And India and but like Caribbean
What kind of development something? So that
that's what they say. African.
Good afternoon. Welcome to session 2, Emerging Studies in Language Teaching. May I cordially invite Dr. Linz Johnson from USA to speak on exploring the nexus of language, culture, and identity. Insights from interdisciplinary perspective. And over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It'll be my job to wake you up after lunch. All right. I'm going to move around just because I know it's after lunch, so I will do my best to keep you entertained. All right, so the topic of my presentation is exploring the nexus of language, culture, and identity, and insights from interdisciplinary perspectives. So looking at different disciplines and how we view culture and identity formation. I want to actually dedicate this to my father-in-law who passed last week, because my wife is from here, from the Philippines. And so when I first met him, the first thing that he talked to me about was this idea of Taglish, the mixing of Tagalog and English. We also talked politics that night, that first night we met. And he also gave me some insight into being a husband and some other things that we could talk about after the presentation. But I want to dedicate this to him and the memory of him. I am Dr. Linz Johnson. I come from the University of Nevada in Las Vegas. I'm a visiting assistant professor there within the College of Education, and I work in the Department of Early Childhood, Multilingual, and Special Education. I'm a scholar of globalization. I've created 17 indicators of globalization in education, and I was an English professor for 17 years. I also taught special education or students with special needs for 18 years. All right, so looking at the analytical framework of language as a cultural tool. So I want you to frame culture outside of race and ethnicity. So when I teach Introduction to Multicultural Education, I try to get them to look outside of race and ethnicity. In America, we're highly focused on race and ethnicity as culture because of the predominance of white male culture in America. And so I'd like for us to think outside of that. So as an example, I'm a scuba diver. That's a culture that we have to communicate within. I'm a lefty, so I looked around the room. I didn't notice any left-handers, but we usually notice each other. That's a culture. I went to the University of Southern California, so when I see somebody wearing something from USC, I give them the fight on sign. I don't have to say fight on. I can just throw up the peace sign and they know what I'm saying, right? And so that's how we know that we belong to a community, right? I consider myself a world traveler, and I also have identified myself because of my connection with my family here as Negro-Pino, right? Black Filipino. All right, so language is tied to culture. It encapsulates the values, beliefs, and traditions of a community. And through language, we get our cultural norms, right? And these are transmitted across generations. Many of us come from cultures that have this oral tradition of telling stories down as they go. I come from descendants of enslaved people who were not taught to read and write when they were enslaved, but they could communicate. So many of the stories that connect me to my culture come from my great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents telling these stories over and over. And even grandparents and parents who had to experience going through civil rights and human rights issues and explaining that to us now that we don't have to really deal with that. All right, so through language, of course, cultural norms are transmitted across generations and individuals learn to navigate because of these connections. Now we have to look at this through interdisciplinary perspectives. So we looked at psychologists, linguists, sociologists, and to see what the connection was between those groups of people working together and how the elements interact between one another. So the data analyzed using a thematic analysis, where I identified patterns and themes and then illustrated the relationships between the ideas of culture and identity, which also go along with diversity and this idea of belonging to a group. So if I'm underwater scuba diving and we're 30 meters deep and someone swims up to me and does this sign, I don't need to know what language they speak, what culture they come from, you know, what gender they are, right? I know they're out of air, so the first thing I'm going to do is share my air with them, right? It gives me, lets me know that they belong to the culture of scuba diving, right? And so that's what we do around. So as you read through the slides and I talk to keep up with them, you can think about ways that you connect with culture. Religion is a way. Now, many times there are religions that are tied to race and ethnicity, but there are other ways that we do not. I am a science fiction geek, for lack of a better word, so if we want to talk Star Wars, I can talk that all night. If we want to talk Harry Potter, I can tell you that I belong to the Slytherin house, right? And those of you that are of that culture know exactly what I mean, and other people who belong to that house. You might even get a sense of who you think I am based on me saying that, right? And so when we look at the anthropological and sociological and psychological issues dealing with language, culture, and identity, we know that it can come from anywhere. I am a right above knee amputee, or just an amputee, but in the community, I'm above knee, so that signifies to other people that my leg was cut off above the knee, so it has different challenges associated with it. So when I meet other above knee amputees, which we call RACA or LACA, left or right, we usually do this weird, like, let's see, right, and take your clothes down, which in other cultures you would never do that. Or if you saw me and another guy with one leg opening our clothes to show each other our sockets, right, and the suspension system that we have, or the mechanical knee or the computer knee that we have, you might think it was strange as an outsider looking in, but to us it's very normal, right? And so the findings suggest that language is a cultural repository. We dump everything about our culture into the language. I listen to hip hop music, so I can tell you good morning. I can tell you magandang umaga. I can tell you buenos dias a todos. And I can also tell you what's up, right? That is a greeting that I use more often. I know other languages, ways to say hello, but the one I use more often comes from my musical culture, right? And then identity through the linguistic practices, and also these historical narratives, moral values, and communal practices. All of these are communicated and reinforced through our interaction. All right. So this idea of sociocultural integration is understanding the role of language as identity formation and how it can inform policies and practices. Right? We talk about diversity, we talk about multiculturalism, but how do we practice that? What does it look like? And it comes from this dynamic nature of language and identity. Right? So exploring this evolving relationship, looking at globalization strategies and tactics, and also having deeper insights into how we can foster inclusive and cohesive communities. All right, so this idea of identity is multifaceted. It's a multifaceted construct. We've constructed what identity is, and like I mentioned earlier, that in most cultures, we look at race and ethnicity as how you identify. When I walk into the room, you identify me as a black man based on the color of my skin, and maybe some other possible, my natural hair, and maybe some other possible indicators of who I am. But what if I don't identify as black first? What if my identification is more of amputee, or world traveler, or multilingualist, knowing more than one language? I need to practice Tagalog much more. Kailangan go practice more, right? And so this leads to some challenges and opportunities that we have to deal with. Right? On one hand, this can lead to conflict and tensions within diverse societies. In America, one of the problems that we're having is the idea of white male has to be fought back against. So we have presidential candidates, we have leaders, we have people who are pushing the idea of not disappearing the white male persona into diversity. It is, in fact, a fight against these diverse principles. But then on the other hand, it offers opportunities for cultural enrichment and innovation. If we don't ostracize those people from the group that want to push white ideals, white leadership, white pride, or white power, maybe we can learn from each other what that means. I've never been in a position of privilege and power, so I can imagine that you would want to not lose that, right? You would fight against losing that in the public. So, for the future directions, we need to navigate multiple norms, right? This idea of hybrid identities, right? Instead of identifying me just as how you see me, getting to know me is what the study said. Getting to know those things that I identify as. In the study, we talked to some males that identify as homosexual. And one thing that they said across the board, 100%, was that their families and cultures and religions were the ones that pushed them away when they came out as homosexual. So they don't identify as white or black or Latino or whatever it is first, Presbyterian, Catholic, Muslim, first, because those societies pushed them out as something was wrong or something unnatural. And so they identified as other things. Father, for example. Husband or wife, for example. Before those things, that was the most important designation in their culture. And so we need to look at, in the future, looking at those evolving relationships between how we identify people and how people identify themselves. And look at it globally, right? Because there are many monocultural cultures that have very fine nuances attached to them that are very diverse when you look under what this study uncovered, right? And of course, doing some longitudinal study that looked at long term. How does that identification change as I develop as a scuba diver toward master diving certification? Like, what does that look like? A year from now or 2 years from now. So that is all I have. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Is this qualitative study?
Yes.
I just wondered about the sample. Who were the participants?
So when I looked at who was going to participate in the sample, I wanted to talk to a wide swath of people. And so we're talking from college age, traditional college age, 18 to 22, professors, Like we did, and it was interdisciplinary, so we looked at psychology departments and had them refer people to us. I was involved in a study with the physical therapy department at UNLV, so I would talk to them about it. My experience in a traditional Filipino family, right, and just those observations, I used all of that to kind of inform, right? So thank you all. I am very interested in cross-border interaction, collaboration, research projects. So I gave you my contact information if any of that comes up. And there was a question back there.
Yeah, firstly, thank you. You did waking us all up.
That was my goal.
You entertained us, which is also fantastic. My actual real question, though, is about the hybrid identities that you touched on toward the end. It, to me, sounds fantastic, and it pulls us away from the poison.
Yes.
That particularly race-related poison,
Yes.
and particularly, in America,
For sure.
I suspect it's worse in other places. But my question around that is, have you done any studies, or do you intend to do any studies to try to push that idea out? Because it's not something I hear often.
Right.
It's very seldom.
I would have to, it would have to be international. America is not quite ready for that conversation. I don't think that the United States is ready to have a conversation where we talk about being multiple things at once. Like I created my Negro Pino persona, right? And so I just don't think they're ready for that at this time, but at some point it will happen.
What struck me was, you were saying, for example, the gay person would go against their own original culture, their religion, or
yes.
that kind of thing. And that's kind of a negative hybrid, if you like. But I can see when you talk about scuba diving, its own different world, and
yes.
the fact that you identify as being also Filipino because of your extended family.
Yes.
These are really positive things, and I suspect there's a huge amount of really good work for the expert like yourself.
Yes, for sure.
Doing that.
For sure.
Maybe we can.
Yeah, it sounds like you're volunteering to work with me.
Well, we do a lot of international stuff ourselves, so yeah, we'll talk.
Yes, definitely. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you all. Any more questions? Thank you all for your time. Salamat po.
Thank you for Dr. Johnson's outstanding presentation. And the following is the presenter is from Australia, Hubert